welcome back. So in this next set of videos, we are going to cover the oil barrels. So I went through the process of producing the low res and high res meshes for these oil barrels here, and all inside of Houdini, and then process the oil barrels through Substance Painter. And I also went through the process of creating a tool that allows me to stack the barrels. So these guys are just the individual models that were produced from Houdini. And this is actually an HDA, or digital asset, that allows me to go and change the stacking amount for these guys. So I can stack these as much as I want here, basically. Cool. And the nice thing about it is all the collision meshes are being generated, the UVs are being generated, and the placement is all taken care of for you. So what I wanted to do in this video was actually just walk through the process of what I did inside of Houdini to create these particular assets. So let's start with the modeling of the barrel asset itself, the low poly and the high poly. So I'm going to jump over into Houdini over here. All right, and let's turn off the stacker tool for right now. Let's just take a look at the oil barrel construction node here. And all I did was I created a geometry node, and then inside of that node, let me actually pull this down to just the head-on light. What I did is I just started with the tube, really. Obviously, I mean, this is an oil barrel, so I started with the tube, and I basically preset the amount of columns. Now, you can expose this later on if you want, but I wanted to keep it so at least it felt relatively round. And then basically I used these two blast nodes. So I got the sides, and then I got the caps, right? So I could work on those independently. And then for the sides, what I did is I went through and I hand selected the edges for the poly bevel here, and I poly beveled that. And then I made sure to turn on the edge face output group called bevel prims. That way I could use it inside of a poly extrude. And that's how I got the little ridge that these oil barrels all have. All right, and then I basically just did the UVs for it and just left it at that, because we'll use a UV layout node later on to get it all nice and straight and laid out appropriately. All right, so with the caps, so I took the caps here, and you can always grab the caps from a tube, right? So whenever you create a tube and you turn on the end caps here, you can always get the caps, because the caps are always primitive 0 and 1. And so that's just one of those procedural things that you can always count on when working with the base tube primitive here. All right, so then I poly extruded up a little bit, then it set it a little bit, and then I extruded out the sides there, and then just pulled it down a little bit. And then I basically did a UV flatten on those guys, and I merged the two together. Because again, we're going to use a UV layout node to organize all this stuff here. Okay, so that was that for the basic shape. Then what I did is I created another smaller tube, and I made sure that this was in relation to the size of the original tube. So I took the original tube radius, the radius scale, and then just gave it a proportional amount, a percentage. So this thing is always 0.2 or 20% of the original radius of the whole oil barrel. That way I know it's always smaller, And then I clipped off the bottom over here, because this is going to be the opening cap basically for the oil barrel itself. So I don't really need the geometry there at the bottom. And then I did another inset, and I pushed that guy in. And then I got the bevel edges by using the minimum edge angle here. Then I did the poly bubble, and I probably should have randomized that, but oh well. And nope, that's gonna bug me. I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna do the attribute randomize like so, and we'll call this the rand bevel. And I just need the 1, and I'll set the min to 0.75 and the max to 1.25. So now I can use the point scale here. And that was quite a bit there. Oh, huh. There we go. Cool. So now it's randomized. All right, so then all I did was made a copy of it and just moved it over and made it a little smaller. And that gave me the 2 caps, one's for ventilation, I think, and the other one is the actual cap that would pour out whatever liquid or whatever's inside the barrel. Okay, and then I positioned it onto the top of the barrel shape that we did with this transform node right here. And then I basically grouped them into a group called caps, just so I can work with it later if need be. And then I added UVs. So I took all of that and merged it together. So let's take a look here. So you'll notice that I actually also went through and displaced or perturbed the actual surface of the barrel. And all I did was the usual thing. So I created a single direction for all the normals. And this is so you don't get that like ballooning effect when you try to displace or use the mountain node on a piece of geometry. I just want a single direction to displace it. And so then I used a mountain node and I displaced it first in the X direction, and then I did it again in the Z direction. And that gave me a pretty good shape for the oil barrel. And the cool thing about this is I can save this out, either as a HIP file or a digital asset, doesn't matter. And what's happening is we're producing both the low res and the high res models with UVs or whatever else you need, vertex colors or whatever. It's all being produced, and all you got to do is just change a couple of parameters and you get a different look. So I merged those two guys together, the caps and the barrel shape, and then I scaled it, or at least I didn't scale it. I just left that there for the tool. And then I did a UV layout, and that laid it out nice and neatly for me. And then that's when I started doing the higher res work. And now I didn't really need to do a ton of stuff. You can go crazy adding high res details if you want, but what I did was a nice simple pass, and I wanted to show you how I went about it. So with this particular model, because everything is, all the polygons are relatively neat and clean, I was able to use a subdivide node, and so I subdivided it. And for this first subdivide node, what I did is I used the open subdiv bilinear. And the reason why I did that is because it doesn't actually smooth the geometry, it just adds subdivisions. And that's exactly what I want. And then the second one, I did the open subdiv Catmull Clark. And that smooths out the geometry and gives you a nice base high-res model to work with. So from there, I just added some normals, and then inside of a point pop here, and I added some noise to it. So I first added some really tiny turbulent noise in here, and it just gave the surface, a nice bumpy look. So it's like it's been painted, but it's a really rough metal underneath kind of thing. And this helps to spread out the specular highlight. And then I used a Voronoi noise over here, and that gives it that kind of dented look. See how we're getting these kind of cool specular shapes. And that basically just gave it the look like, it's been hit a bunch of times and just kind of dented slightly. So there we go. That is how I did the high res, nothing crazy. And then the low res, again, I just passed some normals through it and I made them all smooth. That way the normal map from the high res model will take care of everything. So that is how I built the individual barrel model itself. Again, you guys have access to all this stuff. So let's take one more look over here inside of Unity, and I think it turned out pretty good. It baked beautifully inside of Houdini, and then I just brought everything into Substance Painter and then created a few layers, and boom, worked out perfectly. Okay, so that is the construction of the actual barrel itself, the asset. So let's actually take a look in the next video how to create this stacking asset here where it stacks the barrels appropriately. Okay, thanks so much.